I begin this journey on my old character Mr. Pornflakes and load up good old Gillinor. Now I haven't been on this world for over a year now, so I wasn't sure how my good boys were doing, or if they even remembered me since I set them free. I was hoping they were still alive and well and remembered me. It's been too long and it was time for a reunion. As I awoke from a deep slumber, I was greeted by Munin the Raven, who introduced himself as the brother of Hugin. I wondered why my best bud Hugin never brought him up in our many late night conversations we had with each other. Perhaps there was some family drama that I wasn't aware of, but from my first impressions of Munin, he seemed like a pretty chill dude, and I'm sure we'll become great friends later on. After his brief introduction, I ran over to the sacrificial altars and noticed something very interesting. There was a brand new altar with a giant worm scorpion hybrid looking silhouette with a text reading, "Born in armor, mother of many, queen without a crown, ruler beneath." Well then, queen without a crown, I await our legendary battle. I checked my map, ate some food I had on me, which for some reason unlocked a few crafting recipes, and began my run through memory lane. On my run, I saw my first good boy who didn't recognize me at first and seemed a bit frightened as he ran from me. But as I chased him down, he finally recognized me and we embraced. He then reintroduced me to the rest of his pack, and after a heartwarming reunion, we continued onwards. It felt great being back. I was frolicking with my pack, chasing down deer and boar, and just overall having a good time reliving the glory days, not realizing the dangers the new unexplored biome had in store for me. After being alone for so long, my friends were starving, so I let them hunt to their heart's content until they were well fed and happy. And after a while, I ran across my first base. Memories flooded back as I ran towards it. I greeted the elite 2-star good boys who'd been protecting my home all this time, fed them some deer meat, looked through my storage chests, rested a bit, and continued onwards. I then ran by the trader and checked in with him to see if maybe he had some new things for sale, and noticed something new. It was an egg, and what an expensive egg it was. I'll definitely have to come back once I have the money for it and see what that was all about. 1500 gold seemed a bit excessive, but Haldor the merchant hasn't ripped me off yet. I finally arrived at the main base and started looking through my belongings, looking for something very specific. And after a while, I found it. An item I received from Yagluth, which last time I was here was labeled as a placeholder for the new expansion. But it was now called a Torn Spirit. I wonder what exactly it did, I thought to myself. And after fiddling around a little bit, I found out it's used to make the Wisp Fountain. But before building it, there was one more thing I needed to do, and that was to reunite with my main army of good boys that I let loose on the mountain biome during the fight against Yagluth in my previous video. I honestly just wanted to check on their well-being, as I had a sneaking suspicion at the time that releasing such a large amount of wolves on such a small mountain might have had some serious ramifications. You see, I had this feeling that all the good boys released into the environment at once proceeded to create the largest wolf pack army known to all the lands, and that they together took down the ecosystem and created a wolf hierarchy. I truly believe that a wolf uprising commenced and the good boys slowly took over the globe. But that's just my paranoia speaking. Anyways, I arrived at the mountain, and after a few moments, my fears were put to rest. The good boys were alive and well, and there was no environmental disasters to be seen. Although, to be fair, the wolf hierarchy was starting to take form. I gathered them all up, fed them well, and led them back to base, taking out anything and everything in our way. Locks, fueling villages, trolls, nothing stood in our way. And good God, I missed this. I did lose a few brave soldiers during our trip, and now only the elite remained. Battered and bruised from fighting, I let them inside their new home. I threw down some food and let them eat up and rest as I began making my plans for this run. Now, I didn't know anything about the Mistlands or what horrors awaited me. All I knew was that the new biomes were found on the outer edge of the world, and since I was the closest to the west, that's where I planned to sail to first. Being the seasoned Valheim veteran that I was, I made a portal to get back as a backup in case I die, built myself a ship, and set sail. After a short and peaceful boat ride, I discovered my first Mistlands biome, and what an incredible sight it was. Jagged cliffs and a blood-red sky filled my view, and it was both breathtaking and terrifying at the same time. Now, I didn't want to risk docking in the new biome in fear of getting swarmed by new enemies that I knew nothing about, so I opted to keep sailing until I found a safe haven to dock at and set up shop. After a bit, I found a Black Forest biome, which wasn't ideal due to the potential trolls and grey dwarves spawning, but this was probably the best I was going to get. So, I docked and immediately began building a small house I could build a portal and bed inside. My first priority was getting through the night, since I could always bring in the good boys to protect me later on down the line. Once my house was built, I decided it was time to make the new Wisplight and see what that was all about. As I placed it down, my boy Hugin arrived, who I was happy to finally see after so long. Unfortunately, my excitement to see my old friend was one-sided because Hugin greeted me with some sass, trying to hurt me by saying things like he's bored of me and doesn't want to babysit me while I figure things out. I don't know what his problem was, maybe me, maybe he was jealous of my new side piece Munin or something, who knows. Whatever it was, I had much more pressing things to worry about. Now I wasn't sure what wisps were or what the wisp fountain did, but while Hugin was complaining and being rude, I noticed a shiny ball of light appear, which I grabbed and unlocked the wisp light. Since I didn't know how much I needed, I babysat the thing for the entire night and collected a total of 9 of them. I portaled back to my base, grabbed some spare silver I had lying around, and crafted myself the wisp light, which would apparently guide me through the thickness of the mist as the description read. And it looked pretty cool, but the downside of it was that it replaced a Megan-Yord, which honestly does kinda suck since I can't imagine playing the game without the extra carrying capacity it gave me, but it looks like I'll have to adapt, improvise, and overcome, which is unironically my mantra for these challenges. It looks like it was now time for me to step foot into the mist. With the new wisp light crafted, it was time for me to see what this new biome had in store for me. As I cautiously walked into the darkness, Hugin popped up once again and laughed at my outdated gear, telling me that my tools were just too weak to gather resources in these unexplored lands. I of course tested it out myself by trying to mine the Yggdrasil roots, since I didn't really trust his words of wisdom these days. But he was right. Looks like my next objective was going to be to upgrade the axe and the pickaxe. I continued on, trudging slowly and carefully over the steep terrain, thinking of how my good boys would have a really tough time in this environment, when I ran across a new NPC, a dwarf-looking creature called a Diverger? I slowly approached him, not knowing if he was friend or foe. He noticed me and said hello, which was a relief since I was expecting him to shoot me on sight with his scary-looking crossbow. After we exchanged pleasantries, I bid him farewell and started to head out. And as I was trying to figure out if I would survive a fall off the steep cliff I was on, I was blindsided out of nowhere by the first hostile enemy in the game. A purple cockroach called a Seeker flew up and attacked me seemingly out of nowhere, taking me down to 12 health. I thought I was dead as I started jumping while trying and failing to get over a small edge in an attempt to flee my pursuer. The Seeker was dumbfounded by my attempts as he just stared at me in bewilderment while I made my escape. I ran over to my new dwarf buddy for backup, which I felt kind of bad about bringing a dangerous enemy to him just as we became friends, but I needed to gauge the strength of these Seekers and I didn't want to use myself as a lab rat. He got slaughtered pretty quickly. Not good. After calming down, I took a moment to inspect this new foe. So, the Seekers can fly, huh? Interesting. That combined with the heavy mist seems like a deadly combination. What other horrors await me? Continuing forward, I discovered some magic mushrooms, and learned that they aren't the magic mushrooms that I'm familiar with, but that they give you actual magic powers. Magic. I wonder what that's all about. I then found some cool looking ancient armor that was actually big enough to be worn by giants. But before I had a chance to inspect it, I heard a war horn sound, and as I looked around wondering what made that sound, I was bombed from the air by what appeared to be a giant flying jellyfish monster. Just what kind of nightmarish hellscape have I stumbled onto? After that encounter, I was too scared to explore during the night, so I ran back home to make some new tools and to get better food, since I now knew just how dangerous this place was from my brief exploration. So I portaled back home, made myself the black metal pickaxe, and while deciding what food to bring with me, died to some smoke inhalation. Once I was good and ready, I went back out. While chopping the new Yggdrasil trees, another Seeker blindsided me out of nowhere. I could tell this was going to be a regular occurrence, so I better get used to this. As I continued deeper into these lands, I was attacked by a Seeker soldier, a powerful looking bug with no wings. And as I was running away, I saw what appeared to be an encampment of some kind in the distance. Desperate to get away, I rushed inside, not knowing whether it was safe or not, but taking the risk anyways. And when I got near the entrance, a platoon of dwarves rushed outside to protect me. They absolutely obliterated the soldier and swarmed around me, trying to determine whether I was friendly or not. Hugin, of course, came by and explained that I should be careful around them as they were very quick to anger. I will definitely remember that, since I don't want to get on their bad side after seeing how quickly they took out that soldier bug moments ago. Perhaps I could use them as protection if I get in any trouble near their base. Going further, I notice an interesting staircase being guarded by Seekers. I get their attention and run them back to my new friends for help, which they swiftly give out. Knowing I can count on them for support, I give a nod of approval and run back. My new best buddy Munin gives me a vague rundown of what this place is, and Hugin jealously agrees, calling his brother Lesser. I gotta say, jealousy is not a good look on you, Hugin. Once the brothers leave, I walk cautiously inside to see what all the fuss is about. And little did I know that I was stepping into a nightmare that I would be stuck in for a very, very long time. A nightmare that went by the name of the Infested Mines. I walk inside and quietly sneak towards the entrance, and what I see fills me with terror and dread. Ticks, Seekers, soldiers, all the creepy crawlers you can imagine crammed inside the very tight hallways. And there weren't just a few of them, oh no. There were a lot. These weren't your average everyday burial chambers or crypts. No. These infested mines were in a league of their own. I don't know what kind of treasures there were down here, but I really hope I didn't need them, because if I did, this would be a problem. And after a little bit of research, I found out to my dismay that there are some very valuable trinkets inside needed for progression. So of course, after doing some theory crafting, I came up with a plan. Now, my plan wasn't the best, but it was the only thing I could think of. The infested mines contained black cores, a new material used for creating the new crafting station. I didn't really know what new things I could make with it, but there might be something useful like new armor or a stronger shield perhaps. But the main thing I was looking for were the seal breaker fragments. From what I read online, I apparently needed 9 of them to spawn in the new boss. And because this was an instance dungeon-like area, it meant that I couldn't bring in my good boys to protect me from the dangerous bugs swarming the area. So, I was on my own. Death was all but inevitable, so the plan was to build a temporary bed right next to the mines and brute force my way inside, exploring inch by inch until I found what I needed. It seemed like an okay plan at the time, if only I had realized how wrong I was and how mentally draining these next few days would be. So after resupplying at my base, I built myself a bed and some storage containers for my things and prepared for my first trip. I ate some high healing food, got my rest bonus, and, feeling like a tank with my level 3 wolf armor, I walked inside. 15 seconds. That's how long I lasted after being swarmed by seekers and ticks drinking my blood. This was going to be much more difficult than I thought. I needed a different approach. Now, since my armor didn't help mitigate the damage at all, and only slowed me down, I decided to store it for now and go in naked. This way I would die a lot, but I had better movement speed and I didn't have to worry about recovering my items every single run. While I was in the middle of depositing my items, I heard another war horn and knew what was coming. I immediately looked up just in time to see the giant jellyfish monster shoot 2 fireball projectiles at me, which I barely managed to avoid. Naked and confused, I did the only thing I could, and that was to run to my friends close by for protection. They had some powerful mages of their own and archer warriors who might be able to fight it off. What ensued then was an intense battle of epic proportions, which I sat back and watched, rooting for my friends the whole time. The monster may be able to shoot 2 fireballs at once, but the magic casters use powerful fire spells of their own, and after an intense 5-minute battle, the monster finally went down. I picked up the loot, thanked them, said my goodbyes, and went back to the infested mine. It was time to begin the mentally draining runs of dying and respawning over and over again, like some kind of death loop, while making very minimal progress every single attempt. Also, I don't know why, but it seemed like enemies were multiplying every time I died and re-entered the infested mine. I mean, it was probably because every single new door I opened contained more and more enemies. Minutes turned to hours, hours to days, days to weeks. Well, I mean, that's what it felt like anyways. And after about 2 hours of being stuck in this death loop, I decided it was time to take a break before my sanity ran out. After all this time, I had managed to collect just 2 black cores, which wasn't enough to build anything. So, I collected my things and ran back home for a little break, but not before stopping by my friend's camp to say my thanks. Unfortunately, they didn't really have much time to talk to me because they were too busy fighting another jellyfish when I got there. It looks like they were stuck in a never-ending loop of their own, fighting these terrifying creatures. Because I swear, not even 2 minutes after they finished defeating one, another spawned right away, and their camp was not looking too good. And look, don't get me wrong, I really liked my new friends, but the thing is I kinda needed to steal some of their things. I didn't want to betray them, and by the looks of it, I probably won't have to, since at this rate, it looks like they won't last much longer. Now, okay. This wouldn't be a pacifist run without my good boys, and I wanted to test their abilities in the new biome. So I sailed back to my starting island to begin transporting them to the Mistlands island I was exploring. But when I got there, I noticed a small patch of mist right on the edge of my giant landmass I was on, close to the Yogluth boss. I must have somehow missed it before, but this was quite lucky, since sailing with my good boys can be quite a hassle, and this was perfect. I built myself yet another new base close to the Mistlands biome, and set off to assemble the good boy army. Kinda wish I noticed the Mistlands when I first reunited with them on the mountain, but hey, you know what they say, hindsight is 20/20. As I neared my main base, I noticed 2 locks roaming around, and had an idea. It was time to expand my family. Now, I've never tamed a lox before, but figured this was the perfect opportunity, and I was curious as to see what they could do. And who knows, they could be a fantastic new addition to my family. Trapping them did prove to be a bit more difficult than I thought, but it was nothing compared to the 2-star wolf fiasco from my previous video. After some fumbling around, I had managed to capture both of them, dropped them some cloudberries for food, and waited for them to calm down and start taming. Sometime later, Lox Luther and Loxanne were finally tamed, and I crafted myself a saddle to bring them inside and meet their new family. They were a bit shy of the good boys at first, but seemed to enjoy their new home. I gathered up all my good boys in one spot for Loxanne and Lox Luthor to get more comfortable, which didn't take too long, since after a few minutes there was already a cute little baby Lox running around. It was now time to make the trip out to the new base. I gathered everyone up, saddled up Lox Luthor, and headed out. Now, I knew the power of the good boys, but I didn't realize the power that the Lox were capable of. They were also perfect for the pacifist run, since I had no say over who they did and did not attack. It felt like Lox Luthor was bred for war, and was even powerful enough to take out a troll. He had a mind of his own, and it was bloodthirsty. And I was just there for the ride of my life. After a long and slow trip, I finally arrived and secured my new family from the dangers of the plains by making a moat around the base and walled off Lox Luthor. Now I know what you're thinking, and it may look cruel, but look, I've grown way too attached to him and I didn't want to lose him. And so, the test began as I brought in my good boys to an unfamiliar biome for them to explore. Now, I really missed them, so I was hoping that they would be able to help me out a lot. And for the most part, they fared pretty well against the bugs out here. But there was a big problem: the terrain. You see, the Mistlands have way too many jagged cliffs that the good boys simply couldn't overcome, which put them in awkward positions to where they got stuck and couldn't go forward. Eventually, they met their match and died off to a powerful Seeker soldier. It was a sad sight to behold, but I made sure to avenge their deaths by kiting the soldier through the swamps until he was finally defeated. So, yeah, unfortunately it looks like they wouldn't really be much help in the Mistlands, but I still wanted to bring a few to the new island just for some company and to at least protect my base from trolls and random events. I came back to my base, grabbed the remaining 3 good boys, and set out to their new home. Now that my relaxing break was over, it was time to get back to the chaos of dying a lot while searching for black cores and seal breakers in the mines. On my way to the infested mines, I ran across a new building I've never seen before, guarded by my little friends. Munin popped up and told me a sad tale of their existence, which made me feel pretty sorry for them. So, I stole their cool looking lantern right from under them and moved on. While looking for a new infested mine to explore, I decided to take a risk and see what was in those cool looking crates my soon to be enemies were protecting. Now, I tried to be sneaky, thinking that I'd be able to take what was theirs when no one was looking, but I guess they must have heard me smashing up their property and got really pissed off. They started yelling and threatening to mop the floor with my guts, which meant it was time for me to make my escape. They seemed very serious about killing me since they completely disregarded their own home and even started destroying it in an attempt to get to me. So, I quietly jumped out the window and ran off, never to be seen again. I next found a giant skull, and while admiring the sheer size of it, Hugin came by and gave me a cryptic hint of picking its bones. Naturally, I assumed he wanted me to mine it, so I took out my black pickaxe and began hammering away. A few swings later, I broke the bones and fell into the gooey brain sludge of the skeleton, which gave me a ton of soft tissue. It was quite disgusting, but it might be a valuable resource for something, so I gathered up as much as I could hold. And after some more time passed, I found myself a new infested mine to explore. And hopefully this one had enough materials to be my last, since I was not looking forward to another death loop. My stats have suffered enough from dying in the last one, but it was the only way to move forward, so I had no choice. But before I went inside, I ran back to my base and crafted myself a sap extractor with the materials I stole from my new dwarf buddies. Portaled back to my main island and placed it on the Yggdrasil tree root. I then waited and extracted the sap, which unlocked me some new things, including the new refinery which caught my eye. I also made a mental note for myself to check back here as often as possible to get more sap in case I needed a lot of it for the future. Anyways, back at the mines, well, I mean, to be honest, you've heard it all before. I kept dying and respawning over and over again, slowly collecting the materials, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details, although I will say my dodging and movement skills were definitely evolving throughout this process. And you could even say that I was becoming somewhat of an expert at this. After another hour and like 50 or so deaths, I had collected 3 more black cores, which meant I now had 5 in total, and I could finally build something new. I excitedly portaled back to my main base, grabbed all the materials, and built the new refinery. Hugin came by and told me it was dangerous, which I wish he would have told me before I actually built it, but I think he was still mad at me for being chummy with his brother. I deposited the sap I've been collecting, but couldn't figure out the fuel source. I tried coal, but it didn't seem to work like the other machines, so I did some quick research and found out that soft tissue was the answer. And luckily for me, I had a bunch of soft tissue from that one skeleton brain I mined a while back. I put it in and waited to see what it made, and after about a minute or so, it popped out some shiny green balls, which unlocked the new Galder crafting station, which required, you guessed it, 5 more black cores. Yeah, of course it did. It looks like I was going to lose all my stats from dying at these damn infested mines again. I also quickly found out why Hugin said it was dangerous. These shiny green orbs it produced sent sparks flying which hurt and scared Loxanne. It looks like I was forced to stand next to it and babysit while it produced so that the Lox won't go on a rampage and destroy my base. Now, what happened next was nothing short of a miracle, but I will explain why later. You see, this game has occasional random events of enemies from different biomes spawning in and raiding you. I don't really include these clips because I'm always far away from my base and just run away like the pathetic little pacifist I am, but I was running low on black metal when a skeleton raid popped up near a fueling village while I was on my way to my sap extractor and figured that I could use this to get a few scraps of black metal. But why am I mentioning such an insignificant moment, you may be asking yourselves? Well, it's because something miraculous happened that I didn't even realize at the time. You see, there's an insanely rare trophy dropped by green skeletons called rancid remains. These glowing green skeletons only spawn in the burial chambers and during an event. And well, during this event, I managed to pick one up by accident. I didn't even realize how valuable it was at the time, so I just picked it up and banked it. But I'll explain why it was so vital to this run a little bit later on. Also, while you're watching me die hundreds of times in the background while I'm slowly losing my sanity in the name of progress and entertainment, can I just say, if you haven't subscribed, bro, I have a lot to offer, okay? I have a very monotone voice, little to no editing experience, a very slow upload schedule due to the nature of my videos, and look, I basically have everything you could possibly want for a content creator, so subscribe if you want, or don't. I don't really care. Actually, I do care, please. Okay, begging segment over, let's get back to the game. I had a combined total of what felt like 300 plus deaths in the last 10 days, and I was sick of it. So hopefully these 7 black cores I had managed to scrounge up would be enough for the foreseeable future, because this was not worth it. I grabbed everything I had collected, teleported back to my main base, and built myself the new Galder crafting table. I placed down the Galder table, and Hugin greeted me, calling me a sorcerer supreme. Well now, this was exciting. But the question was, could I use the dark arts in this challenge? I quickly dismissed him and checked out what this new crafting table had in store for me, and looked through all the new stuff. The armor did seem cool, but what really caught my eye was 2 spells in particular, the Staff of Protection and the Dead Razor. And the best part about these staffs was that I didn't have to grind out any new materials for them since I already had everything I needed, including the incredibly rare Rancid Remains trophy that I had just randomly stumbled onto not that long ago. Now, the Staff of Protection was something that I immediately knew I needed, and without a second thought, I grabbed the materials and crafted that bad boy right up. I tried using it, but realized that I didn't have enough mana for casting it. So I looked up how to get mana, and found out that I needed some specific food, which actually wasn't too difficult to make. After making some of that delicious new food, I grabbed the Rancid Remains trophy and made the Dead Razor staff to test it out. The Staff of Protection could prove to be incredibly useful in my travels, but the Dead Razor was an absolute godsend for this run. Sure, it spawned a weak and very fragile skeleton which did basically no damage and was killed in just a few hits, but comboed with the protection orb around him, he could help out quite a lot, especially as a distraction for my enemies. Now this was blood magic, and there's always a downside to blood magic. The downside here was that every time I cast a spell, it damaged me every single cast, and the new food that I had to use for this spell to work had very poor stamina and health stats. The game has definitely thrown quite an interesting curveball at me, and I was excited to see what I could do with it. I now had only 2 objectives left: find the boss and obtain the 9 Sealbreaker fragments to spawn it. And I was hoping that my new blood magic sorcery would make exploring the infested mines a better experience. Before I went out, I cooked up a bunch of that new food while Loxan tried to sabotage me by breaking everything around me. And I tried to plant the new magic mushrooms in my carrot and turnip fields, but unfortunately I found out that I need to plant them in the new biome. I set up my inventory with a new assortment of food and went back out to the Mistlands, eager to try out this new blood magic to see if it would make my life any easier. Back in the Mistlands in a brand new infested mine, I ate my food and summoned my first skeleton, a nice chap named Toke. I gave him a protective shield and pushed him into the front lines while I peacefully watched him fight a tick. He was as weak as a level 1 skeleton. But hey, beggars can't be choosers, so I had to work with what I got. This was of course no good boy, but with the right leadership, who knows what we could accomplish. After some time, I was slowly but surely learning the ropes with this new playstyle of supporting my weak and fragile new protector. Basically just staying in the back and giving him buffs while cheering him on. The progress was of course painfully slow, but it was much better than how I previously went about it. Little by little, we cleared out this new dungeon, and I could actually take my time and look around now that it was safe. Now, the skeleton was weak, and I mean, he was really weak against regular seekers. So, when I ran across a 2-star seeker, I knew I had no chance. Until I discovered a nice little strategy inside these dungeons. I didn't know if this was a bug, but the bugs bugged out near the entrance every single time. So when I summoned a skeleton archer, I knew that I had come across the ultimate cheese. And it worked great. Until it didn't. Looks like they can actually squeeze through the gap if they fly. But regardless, this was a great find, and I would be taking advantage of this bug abuse whenever I could. This made the Archer Skeleton variant the most useful one by far, and there was a 1 in 3 chance of spawning him. The other two variants, being the Sword and Shield variant and just a sword wielding one, were pretty much just throwaways. The good thing is that the infested mines had tons of hallways and corridors I could use to my advantage to trap the massive bugs, which is exactly what I did. And so, over the course of many days, exploring every single infested mine, filled with lots of dodging and weaving like a pacifist on a mission, I finally found the final fragment, and a tankard to celebrate, which I used to drink up some mead in celebration of finally being done. I ran back home and crafted the Seal Breaker, an item that I assumed would be used to summon the final boss. I also upgraded my Dead Razor staff, which allowed me to summon 2 skeletons at a time, doubling my efficiency and safety, as well as the Staff of Protection. And finally, I made myself that new magic armor, which in hindsight I probably should have done a long time ago, since I committed myself to this new role as a Sorcerer Supreme. 1 objective down and 1 more to go. All that was left was to locate and defeat the final boss. With everything I needed out of the way, it was time to put all my focus into finding the boss. Unfortunately, she wasn't on this island, but with the hardest parts out of the way, I figured that this wasn't an issue. I had my newfound skeleton posse by my side to assist me, and with the amount of resources I had accumulated thus far in the infested mines, I had enough food to sustain me for a long time. So, I set sail looking for a new biome to explore and found one very quickly. I circled around it as always, looking for a safe spot to dock at, build up a new base, and headed out to explore. Now, let me mention one thing here. Because I was avoiding spoilers and went into this new update blind, I didn't really know what to expect from the boss fight. The thing is, I had relied on my good boys for every single boss fight previously, and was a bit worried that another bone mass situation might happen. Look, don't get me wrong, I loved my skeleton brethren, but I knew that they wouldn't be able to take on a boss seeing as how much they struggled against regular seekers, not to mention their variants. But I had hope that whatever the game threw at me, I would be able to find a way to overcome. Little did I realize what was waiting for me up ahead. This new Mistlands biome was massive, which I knew because I had circled around the entire thing looking for a safe area, and I hoped that it wouldn't take me too long to find the boss. Unfortunately, I was very wrong. Now I'm not going to bore y'all with all the details of my exploration here, because it would just be more of the same stuff that I already went over before. Exploring this new island took me a lot of time. But I covered every square inch of this new biome, taking in the rare but beautiful view every now and then. Thinking about it now, it's a bit sad that the mist is so heavy that you can't appreciate how incredible this biome looks. But on the other hand, that's what makes rare moments like these that much better. Also, having 2 skeletons instead of 1 was a game changer, since I could now split the mob's attention 3 ways, which made things much easier and much less stressful. I really should have upgraded my staffs from the very beginning. After countless days of exploring this biome, I found no signs of the boss, so I set sail yet again. I had to be careful this time around though, because I was getting very dangerously close to the edge of the world, which admittedly I was curious about since I've never sailed off the edge before. Less than 30 seconds of sailing later, I found a new biome. I set up shop and headed out. And then, it finally happened. After clearing out a few seekers near an interesting structure, I noticed a brand new looking door with a symbol on it that I've yet to see. I walked up the stairs to inspect it and read the runestone next to it. This was the lair of the boss, and my heart dropped. My worst fears came to life. The new Mistlands boss was in an instanced dungeon, which means that my good boys weren't able to help me out this time. In the back of my mind, I knew something could go wrong. I had a few concerns, like I'd really struggle getting my good boys through the rocky terrain, or that the boss would be very resistant to good boys, or something along those lines. But never did the thought cross my mind that I wouldn't be able to use them at all. But all was not lost. I mean, I overcame bone mass, so maybe I could come up with something and overcome this brand new foe. I mean, I haven't even been inside to see what I was working with. It would be silly to give up now. I portaled back to my base to grab the seal breaker, as well as some supplies to build a new base, and while getting my things together, a death skeeto flew inside and startled Loxanne, who went on yet another rampage destroying my base. If I wasn't a pacifist, I swear they would be Lox meat pies by now. Anyways, I grabbed the seal breaker and went towards the boss. I built myself a cozy little base right next to the front of the entrance, with a bed for respawning and chests filled with a ton of food. I got my rest bonus up and went inside to fight the queen without a crown. Now, what can I say about the queen? Well, simply put, she was terrifying. first thought that crossed my mind when I saw her was the Chimera Ant Queen from Hunter x Hunter. A massive bug from your worst nightmare. She looked like some sort of hybrid ant, slug, thing. Basically a creature from hell. And holy hell was she fast and deadly. I tried learning her attack patterns by using the skeletons as decoys, and once I figured her movements out a bit, I then tried to see if my skeleton brothers would be enough to whittle her health down slowly. But knowing deep down inside that this was a lost cause. They did do a few licks of damage every now and then, but the problem was that she summoned her children very frequently, and this was just too much for my frail skeletons to handle. Was this it? Was all of this for nothing? Have I finally been defeated? No. I can't give up after all this time. There had to be a way. I just had to think of something. But what could I possibly do? This was an instance dungeon, so my options were not just limited, they were basically non-existent. You can't build or craft anything inside except a campfire. I can't use any forms of weapons as a pacifist, and you can't bring tamed animals inside. I was lost in a sea of despair. But that didn't mean it was over yet. The Mistlands have only been out for like 8 days, so perhaps there was some hidden cheese tactic I could discover before it got fixed. So I got to work, trying to jump on every ledge, hide inside every nook and cranny I could find, but the queen's attacks were too powerful and she destroyed everything she swung at in a single hit. Until I found something. Right near the entrance, I found a little ledge that was just high enough that her little T-Rex arms didn't reach, and where the Seekers weren't able to fly to. This could be it, I thought. Unfortunately, my skeletons, for some strange reason, weren't able to attack her in this spot, even though her face was right in front of them. But I guess they were just too stupid to take advantage of the situation I was in. But I got another idea. Campfires. The only thing buildable inside the dungeon. They weren't a viable choice before because if you placed them down on the ground and she slithered over them, they would instantly be destroyed. But when placed on this ledge, they damaged her and I could repair them before they broke. Now, I'll be honest. I hated the thought of doing this, and I felt like it was a cop-out. But I was desperate at this point, and so far, this was the only thing that worked. Until it didn't. You see, the queen starts doing this acid attack very frequently once her health gets below 70%, and 50% of the time, it hit the pillars I was standing on, damaging them in the process. Now, 50% of the time was terrible odds, considering the fact that I had like 6 pillars to work with. On my very first attempt, she was down to 20% health, and I was on my final pillar. The odds, they were not in my favor. And then, it happened. The final pillar broke, making the score 0 for me and 1 for the boss. But I almost had her. Surely, if RNG was on my side, I would be able to win. I reloaded my backup save file and tried again. And yeah, okay, go ahead, roast me for using a backed up save file. I know, I deserve it. What happened over the next 9 or 10 hours, I will never recover from. I attempted the very same strategy again and again and again, like 30 to 40 times. But I was never able to get her down as low as I did that very first attempt. I almost wish I hadn't have gotten her that low my first time, because it gave me this illusion that this was possible. I mean, I'm sure it is possible if you have the patience of a monk, but I was losing my sanity at a very rapid pace. At a certain point, I even got my brother to log in and help me out with repairing the campfires. He of course wore the exact same gear and had the same setup as me, since I did not want to cheat. He was basically just there for moral support and helping me theory craft new ideas to defeat this disgusting monster. Until one attempt where we both died around the same time, and something peculiar happened. Once we died, we respawned and I went out for a smoke break while my brother went inside to recover his stuff. When I got back, he told me that the queen, well, she was gone. I ran inside to see what the hell he was talking about, and after recovering my items and looking all over the place, she was in fact nowhere to be found. Was this a glitch? Was she hiding from us? I mean, there was no boss trophy laying around, so she obviously didn't die. But if that was the case, where was she? I went to the Valheim subreddit to see if this happened to anyone else, and found out some very interesting information. And apparently this was somewhat of a common occurrence that people have experienced before. People were saying that there's a possibility that this queen has escaped into the outside world. I wasn't sure what to believe, but decided to go on an expedition and find out. If there was even a 1% chance that this happened, then this was huge. After around 45 minutes of searching, my brother pings me his location and tells me he actually found her. I immediately rush to his location, and when I get close, the boss music starts playing and her health bar pops up on screen. She was actually roaming around in the outside world and out of her prison. This changes everything. I quickly tell my brother that I can handle it from here, and he responds with,
"So I can uninstall again now?"
With the queen roaming around outside, this opened up a whole bunch of options for me, but I think you all know where I'm going with this. It was time to bring in the good boys. Now, after 10 plus hours of being around her, I knew her attack patterns very well. So I knew that even my good boys might not be enough to take her out, which meant that I needed an ungodly amount of them before our final battle. I brought as many of them as I could with me to this island to the brand new breeding grounds. I opened up some old school RuneScape on my second monitor and began the very long process of watching them do the dirty. 4 or 5 days of breeding later, and Valheim gets the first Mistlands patch. And it looks like the queen escaping her prison was one of the bugs that did in fact get patched out. But I don't care. I was taking advantage of this no matter the cost of my reputation, so I'm sorry, but it is what it is. I've honestly suffered a little bit too much for me to call it quits at this point. My good boy army was ready for war, and I was not about to let them down. And yes, I named every single one of them because they weren't just mindless drones doing my bidding. No. They were family, ready to put their lives down on the line for me, and I couldn't be more proud. I called Caleb, Oliver, Henry, George, Roman, Stan, Lucas, Leo, Julian, and last but not least Owen to my side, gave them a pre-battle speech to get them pumped up for the upcoming fight, and set off to see the queen. Now, even though I had a mountain of good boys shrouded in a protective bubble, this doesn't mean the fight was already won. Sure, I felt invincible, but the queen was by far the toughest, most deadly boss to currently exist, and I was still worried something might go wrong. I just didn't know if my good boys would do enough damage to her since she was meant to be fought inside a dungeon. But I was hoping, no, more like praying, that even if she was able to wipe out every single good boy, that they would at least do enough damage to where I could have my skeletons finish her off. And it was time to find out. I walked slowly and carefully along the outer path of the island to find her, and once I found an entrance near a giant skull, which she probably devoured, I squeezed through and entered her roaming area. I had absolutely no time to assess the situation as she bolted out of the mist, trying to sink her fangs through my throat. My good boys dove in to protect me and lost their protective shield and half of their health from just one swing. But they just didn't give up, knowing that they would all be wiped out if they kept going back to protect me. I shed tears for my good boys as I kept on helplessly trying to shield them. And just when I thought all hope was lost, the final few survivors leapt in and dealt the finishing blow. The monster was finally defeated and this nightmare was over. The memories of those those best boys will live in my heart forever. I wouldn't be where I was without them. Hayden, William, Ezra, Caleb, Brody, Mavin, and Trump were all that were left, and they deserved to live out the rest of their days in peace. I picked up the queen's head and prepared to go back to the altar to hang it up. But not before doing one thing that I've always wanted to do. I made it back, hung up the trophy, and was just about to start monologuing, but instead was rudely interrupted by an enemy. So instead I ran to the safety of my little hut, drank some mead in celebration, and logged off for the last time.